Close your eyes for a moment and picture Penn Street in post-World War II Reading. The sounds of jazz waft from the Melody Bar above 9th Street, known as the jumpin'est place in the city. The Octagon Bar is nearby, and several others. Down the street is the 802 Bar and the Mecca Bar. All of them have live bands. Back then, saxophonist Frankie Scott and the Harlem Rhythm Boys, a 6-member jazz band, played at those clubs and at dances at the Elks Club, the Legion, the Masonic Clubs, and at the Northeast Republican Club at 10th and Walnut Streets. In those days, Reading was known as a music town, where jazz musicians could find plenty of work. Starting in the 1960s, as rock and roll took over the airwaves and audiences for jazz declined, the clubs were closed down, one by one. The Melody became a beauty parlor, and the Northeast Republican Club eventually became Genesius Theater, and jazz musicians from Reading, including Frankie Scott, were forced to seek work in other cities like Lancaster, Harrisburg, and Philadelphia, and that included Frankie Scott. It was Frankie's dream to see live jazz return to his hometown. In 1991, when Berks Jazz Fest was held for the first time, he lived to see his dream beginning to come true. He participated in the festival until his death in 1995. Frank Scott was born in Northwest Reading in 1923, and while he was in grade school, his father bought him his first clarinet.
I had a teacher for 2 weeks. His name was Saxy Schallenberger, and he'd come to your house and give a lesson for 50 cents. After 2 weeks, Pop said, "That's too much money. We can't afford it," because 50 cents was a lot of money during the Depression years.
Frankie joined the Northwest Junior High School Band, where he learned to read music and later played in the Reading High School Band. After graduating, he joined the U.S. Army.
Then's when I got serious about music. I was stationed in New York City the whole time during the war, playing in the Army Band. All we did was play at the piers for the guys going overseas and at the Stage Door Canteen on 44th Street. Every Sunday, they'd have big celebrities perform. You might see Bing Crosby, Sinatra, or Betty Grable. Anyone appearing at the Paramount Theater would come to the Stage Door Canteen, and we were the backup band.
That band was full of jazz musicians who are now legendary, like Cy Oliver, the head arranger for Tommy Dorsey and Jimmy Lunsford, Mercer Ellington, Duke's son, who later led the Duke Ellington Band, Charlie Fuqua, one of the original Ink Spots, the renowned vocal quartet, Milton Larkin, a band leader before and after the war, and Dan Miner, who played trombone with Count Basie and Cab Calloway. After the war, Larkin, who was from Houston, Texas, invited Frankie to play baritone sax in his band on a tour through the South.
Traveling through the Southland was a new experience with segregated restaurants and hotels. Some places, there were no hotels for us. We had to sleep on the bus. In New Orleans, it was the first year they ran the Mardi Gras after the war. We played in the Gypsy Tea Room. It was one of my only experiences with the Mardi Gras. There were a lot of people having a good time, a lot of good music, dancing in the streets. Then we went on to Texas.
When he returned to Reading in 1948, Frankie started his band playing in local clubs. As those venues disappeared, he started playing 4 to 6 nights a week in regional places within commuting distance. He played holidays at the Melody Bar. For 4 months out of the year, he would travel farther, performing in Canada, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico. He also did 2 tours with Bill Haley and the Comets as the opening act, and later recorded with them. One of the members of Frankie's band, vocalist Tony Lynn, the 2006 winner of the Frank Scott Award, remembers her years performing with him.
Frankie Scott was the music man in the city of Reading, all around Berks County, up and down the road. And I had an opportunity to finally meet Frankie Scott. It was like an old jazz type hip uncle to me. He was very protective, loving. You felt secure in his presence, and music was his whole life. He was the hippest old man. To me at the time, he was an old man then, and but like I said, he was the hippest guy. He knew everything. He knew everybody, and he approached me and wanted to know if I would do a few sessions with him. He did a lot of affairs around the city of Reading, mostly private. He had different parties, private clubs himself. There was one called the West End, which was located at, I think, around 2nd and Penn, the West End Social Club. And what he would do, as I said, he was always involved in music. He would invite his friends from New York City. He was back and forth to New York City a lot. They would come to his local little establishments, and there would be ongoing jazz sessions. Some were notorious and some were, everyone, as a matter of fact, was new to me because this was a brand new world. The vocalist, as I grew, I knew and I loved and admired, but the actual jazz men themselves, the men of jazz, it was a learning experience and a beautiful one because I heard and was shown the mastery of the musician and his horn or his drums or whatever instrument he or she were, playing. And to find the comfort and the beauty of all of this embracing me and taking me through a kind of musical affair that I wanted to experience, it was just heaven. Frankie was...
As Frankie settled back into the Reading community, marrying and raising 3 children, he became prominent in other ways besides his performing career. He served on the Reading School Board for 5 years and on the Boys Home Board for 15 years. He participated in the urban ministry and served on the Berks Arts Council, now Berks Arts. He also shared his knowledge of jazz with Reading School District students through the Reading Musical Foundation's Music in the Schools program.
I picked up the bass, electric bass, when I was almost 16 years old. And from that point on, I got a job at J.C. Penney's in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, and I put $10 a week down on a bass at Eckert Brothers on High Street. And around Christmas time, I paid the bass off and I was allowed to bring it home. From that moment on, I knew what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I was going to play that bass. Little did I know that the bass was going to give me the life it has given me. Like I said, I knew I wanted to play that bass, but I didn't know what kind of life was in front of me because of that bass. And my love for music, which I get from my mother, who was the first time I ever heard the name Frankie Scott was from my mother before I ever met him, before I ever worked with him. So it's, my mother is still alive, by the way. She's 98 years old, yes. But it was so strange after she knew I was moving to Reading. I was playing with Bobby Newton and Archie Jenkins, and moving to Reading, and next thing you know, through those guys, I met this great, famous Frankie Scott. It was amazing. Little did I know, how influential he would be at the time. Him, Bobby, and Archie, those 3, if I had not met them, I don't know how far my career would have gone, especially my aspirations to be a jazz player. Playing with Frankie, also, it was the same thing. They were Bobby, Archie Jenkins, Frankie. They were from a certain school of music that I think that more than anything, they made me play hip. I remember playing a bass line on a blues with Frankie one time, and I was playing the rock and roll style, walking bass style, and he stopped me and says, "Yo, man, don't play that. That's old. Don't play that. Play jazz, man." And he said, "You know how to do that? I heard you do it with Archie. Don't play that." And I was like, "Well, okay." And I never did that again, But playing, that was the kind of stuff he would do. And I don't know if you ever heard Frankie play ballads. I think I really learned how to play a ballad by listening to him. Really, no one could do that like him. To this day, no one. It was amazing. I remember when he had the jazz clubs. That was the best. Man, down on, what was it, Second and Penn? Oh, man, that was great. I mean, it was like he was bringing in jazz artists from all over, mostly the East Coast, of Philly and New York and whatever. And I remember meeting Tommy Campbell there, one of the premier jazz drummers in the country today, or in the world actually. I ran into Tommy in Japan. He was living there for a long time, and he remembered me, and I remembered him because I got to play with him at Frankie Scott's club with Frankie. Frankie was in his element at that time, man. He loved it. He had Don Patterson there, and it was just the best. So I played in that club a lot with Frankie, because when the nights that it was just him, usually he hired me to play bass if he couldn't find an upright player. So I was the electric guy, and from that point on is when I think he decided that I would be able to play on his record, and so for me, I was young, man. That's some big moments to be around a guy like that and learn so much from it, and most importantly, someone who had a lot of faith in me as a bassist. That's what he had. That gave me confidence. I mean, that gave me extreme confidence. And I needed it. People think I'm I'm the opposite. Everybody thinks I just know who I am. I know what I do, and I know this, and I know. No, I needed the affirmation from someone like him. It's great. He said, you play your kids' music. He said, that's great. And he says, but he said, he always told me, he said, you have a natural sense for this idiom. He said, but you got to do it. And he gave me the opportunity to do it. He would give me that opportunity, probably more than anyone at that time. Until I basically started then doing it on my own, or with the bands I was putting together. It's funny because I think because of that relationship, to this day, I'm known as a jazz musician. I'm really that's only one part of me, I'm just as much of a funk musician because that's how I started as a jazz musician. But Frankie and the crew, they got me there, so that I could be. Now I play upright bass. I remember they used to tell me all the time, you should play upright bass, And about 11 years ago, I finally picked it up. I wish he was around to hear it. I do. I think about him a lot when it comes to me playing the upright. I wish he could hear me play. I do. I think he'd like it. I played on a couple songs, and for me, it wasn't the first time I recorded, but it was the first time I recorded jazz. And I was nervous. I was like, I'm down in Philadelphia. I forgot the name of the studio. And I was nervous. And Marty Mellinger was producing it. So I was playing with Marty at the time. We had a band called the Mangos, Marty and the Mangos, which was a stellar cover band at the time. And so, that helped because he was there, it helped me keep my wits about me, because I knew he believed that I could do it. So, it was cool. So once I did 2 songs, I think, and once I did them, and it was over, the sessions were over, I was like, oh, I can do this. That wasn't bad at all, And once I heard the record, then I was pretty proud of what I did. At that time, for me, it was monumental.
Later in his life, in 1989, Frankie recorded his first solo album, You're Never Too Old to Dream. Record producer and pianist Marty Mellinger, winner of the 2011 Frank Scott Award, remembers overseeing that album.
I'm a local piano player, musician, I've been a banker. I have, at the age of 32, I retired from banking and decided I wanted to go back into music full time. So I started a band in the mid 80s, became Marty and the Mangoes. Some of the other people who were in that are part of this project, I think. Benny Sims was a founding member. David Cullen was a founding member. We started to play at the Sheraton on Sunday nights for a dance night, which the Sheraton had never had bands on Sunday nights, and I thought it would be a good idea to have a Sunday night. And it turned into the biggest night of the week. And because that was so successful, the Sheraton management approached me about doing a jazz night during the middle of the week. So they had that really neat lounge over there, the Red Balloon Lounge, if you remember that. And it was, there was a little piano pit kind of in the middle of the room. And so the jazz players would set up in there. And that's when I first started working with Frankie on a regular basis, Frankie Scott. And he would play sax, and his buddy Al Gray would come up from Pottstown and play with us. We had Dominic Fiore on bass, and we'd have different players come in as guests and stuff. So that was how I started working with Frankie. Then maybe 2 or 3 years later, Jerry and Carolyn Holleran approached me about doing a record for Frankie. And I'd never produced a record, so I thought, well, it's a great opportunity to do that. So I said yes, and we booked a studio down in Philadelphia, and then we started to hire players. So that, let's see, I would say we had 2 or 3 piano players, 2 or 3 horn players, 3 drummers, maybe different bass players. And Frankie selected the material that he wanted to record. We got the rights to all of that. And then we started to go into the sessions. And I think we did it in about 3 or 4 days. Got it mixed down there, and I think it took us, I don't know, maybe another 6 months to release it. So the album has maybe 10 cuts on it. The title cut is When You Grow Too Old to Dream. And we thought that that had some possibilities for naming the record. So the record is called Never Too Old to Dream, not When You Grow Too Old to Dream. Because Frankie was, at a pretty advanced age at that point, and that was his first record. So Never Too Old to Dream seemed like a good title. So that's how we did that. I'd have to review the record itself to tell you some of the other titles. There was a thing called Jazz Heaven that was an extended blues where Frankie really sort of did a little, I won't call it rapping, but a precursor to rapping, and he talked about Jazz Heaven and the people that you're going to run into there. And I think there were a couple of ballads. I remember doing There Will Never Be Another You, I believe is one of the first cuts on the record. Frankie had a really smooth, beautiful sound that just pulled you in and made you, and a style that made everybody relax. He wasn't laid back. He had energy, but he did it in a way that it didn't force you into being involved. The music made you come to it the way he played. The sound of his sax was just really beautiful.
10 years after Frankie's death, Berks Arts decided to present the Frank Scott Award annually to notable musicians. The award was founded and sponsored by the Geraldine Foundation, which also sponsors the Art of Jazz annual exhibit during Boscov's Berks Jazz Fest. Through their foundation, T. Jerome Jerry Holleran, co-founder of Arrow International, and his wife Carolyn are major supporters of the arts in Berks County, including the Reading Public Museum and Berks Arts. John Ernesto, artistic director of the Berks Jazz Fest, remembers how the Frank Scott Award was conceived.
The idea of the award started with a conversation with Jerry Holleran. So Jerry was very close to Frankie, and we decided to explore ways to keep his legacy alive. And as the years go on, people remember who Frankie was. So we had lunch at the Peanut Bar one day and brainstorming ideas, and we came up with the possibility of creating a Frank Scott Award to recognize Frankie, and also to recognize someone in the community who has worked to keep jazz alive, has worked on behalf of jazz in the community. And so we took the idea to Berks Arts Council, and they said yes, and then so the Frank Scott Award was established. We put a committee of local musicians and people involved in jazz together to discuss and come up with a way of a criteria to present it. And that was back, I guess, 2006. We did it first one, 2005 with Doc Mulligan, the perfect person to get the first one.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's a great way. The Frank Scott Award is a great way to introduce Frank to a lot of people as the years go on. And I mean, even myself, I was involved with the Jazz Fest at the beginning, but I didn't know Frank Scott that well. I met him a few times, but really didn't know him that well. And so I think it's an important part of the festival every year now to present that award, and some great people have won it, and we continue to give it out. Yes, we try to focus on Berks residents. It's been a lot of musicians, but it's also, there's been organizations like Reading Musical Foundation received it last year. So the criteria is expanding a little bit. We consider people who have been very involved in the arts and very involved in jazz from a philanthropic point of view. So, yeah, I think just recognize people who've gone above and beyond to keep the spirit of jazz alive in this community. Discovered about Frank after we started the award was how he was involved in the schools. I mean, back in, I guess the 80s and stuff, he was helping young musicians and getting instruments to kids in schools. So he was involved in the education portion well before it became organized. He was just doing it on his own, to help young potential musicians. So, yeah, so I think that's something we should all remember too. About not only was he a great player, he was an ambassador to jazz from Reading, but he also had the vision to see the education component, how important it was. I appreciate Jerry and Carolyn Holleran and the Geraldine Foundation for getting on board with this to remember Frankie, who was, like I said, was a dear friend of both of them, and I appreciate that they had the vision to establish the Frank Scott Award.
Reverend Harry Serio, past president of Berks Arts Council, now Berks Arts, and festival chairman for Berks Jazz Fest, remembers the consensus on choosing Robert Doc Mulligan as the recipient of the first Frank Scott Award.
Well, the first award, of course, was given to Doc Mulligan, Robert Mulligan, and I knew Doc because he had performed up in Kutztown, and an excellent trombone player, and the fact that he was a radiologist with the Reading Hospital, but he performed with a lot of well-known musical groups. But he also had a keen interest in education, and he started a program of Get Jazz for young people. So he was an obvious selection for our first award.
The thing about Doc Mulligan is that he led a double life. He was a practicing radiologist who developed the nuclear medicine department at the Reading Hospital and practiced at the Ephrata Hospital. He was known for being a brilliant doctor who cared deeply about his patients. At the same time, he was a lifelong jazz trombonist and pianist, as well as a professional composer and arranger. Doc was born in Ashland, PA in 1926. He graduated from Penn State, where he played trombone in the Blue Band, and then graduated from Jefferson Medical School in Philadelphia in 1951. He and his wife, Rose, settled in Shillington, where he became a resident and then an associate radiologist at the Reading Hospital. They raised 2 daughters and made a life there. Doc played with the Hayford Jacobson Big Band, the Wyomissing Big Band, the Bobby Mercer Big Band, Trombones Incorporated, and Bones of Contention. He did freelance work for Helen O'Connell, Billy Epstein, Jack Jones, Sammy Kaye, Maynard Ferguson, Al Martino, Ronnie Millsap, and others. He was also a supporter and participant in the Berks Jazz Fest, especially in its educational programs. This led to the festival's Doc Mulligan Get Jazz Day, and to his winning of the inaugural Frank Scott Award. He passed away in 2021 and is remembered fondly by his musical friends and colleagues, starting with saxophonist, composer, and winner of the 2010 Frank Scott Award, Chris Heslop.
I met Doc, I was probably in my 20s, recently moved here to Berks County, and I was a saxophonist, and I was asked to play in a big band, or actually I think it was a rehearsal. I went to play in a rehearsal, and we played some, handwritten arrangements, and I found out it was the guy in the trombone section, and I was always a writer, composer, and arranger, so I talked to him a little bit. I thought, okay, this is a pretty cool guy. And then a few days later, I was working at a music store at the time, and he came in with another guy, and they bought like $800 worth of music stands from me, and it was kind of cool. So that I met him twice in a week, and I thought, I think I'm gonna get to know this guy. And then, in the coming years, I played a lot of gigs with him and drove to gigs with him, so I got to know him real well. Musicians get to know each other real well driving to and from gigs, so we logged many hours together. Yeah, I think Doc and any professional musician would say, besides the obvious of you have to learn your craft well and practice and all that, but you really you need to do what you say you're going to do and get to places on time, which means early, and look decent, and you have to do all those regular basic things that you have to do for any job. I don't care what it is, but you need to be dependable. I had this like 12-piece New Orleans-based band, kind of a brass band, and I would have Doc play in it. I had kind of a wide range of ages of people, 20s to whatever he was at the time, 70s. And whenever I always had to call him for a gig. I'd email everybody, in one email, but I'd have to call Doc. He would never open up an email. And his response when I would say, "Oh yeah, I have a gig on May 10th. Can you do this?" And he would always respond, "If I'm still around." So that was his, dry sense of humor. But if you would point out that's a sense of humor, he wouldn't. He would just say, I mean it.
Ray Mest, a jazz pianist who goes by the stage name of Ray Allen, is another double-lifer. Like Doc Mulligan, he had a full-time career as a math professor at Albright College and also has performed with bands and as a soloist. He too is a composer and arranger. He shares memories of his long friendship with Doc Mulligan.
So I played with a number of local bands, 5 or 6 bands, and then I got tired of that. Wanted to do my own thing, so I formed my own bands, and probably had at least 4 or 5 different groups, and it was a lot of fun doing that. But when disc jockeys came in, it was difficult to get work, so I decided just to become a soloist, and I did music through MIDI, which is to write and compose and play all of your own instruments and compose. So I composed and arranged 600 tunes doing that, and then I became a soloist and working that way, along with small group work. So in those early years, before I did all of those kinds of things on my own and had my own band, I had the privilege and the opportunity to work with some of the local big bands. I could read, and I guess they were looking for young players that were around the area. I got called, and I got involved with the Hayford Jacobson Big Band and the Reading Big Band, and a couple other larger bands. And that's where I ran into a gentleman by the name of Bob Mulligan, Dr. Bob Mulligan, better known as Doc. And while I never heard him play piano, and I know he does play piano, it was not something I could hear because I was a piano player. So we didn't come together playing pianos, both of us. I got to hear him obviously play his trombone, which was extraordinarily good. And I wasn't that close to him at first because we were, a group of 25, 30 people. But he came over to me during one of the rehearsals and introduced himself to me. It was before we started actually playing. And I was doing some runs on the keyboard to warm up. And he said to me, he says, "Ray, how do you do that fingering on that run? Show me that run." And I'm like, why is he asking me this? This guy's a pro. I'm just starting out. I'm a neophyte. But he was interested in listening to how I was warming up and the various chords I was playing. Historically, that was interesting because looking down the road many, many years after that, when Doc was coming to hear me play, and this was 30 to 40 years later, he would always come up and compliment me about the chords that I was using, that I used very intricate chords. But you know what? He was the guy that really could do that better than anyone that I ever met. That particular rehearsal we were doing, he did something actually startling to me. I'll never forget it. He was arranging for a group called the Trombones Incorporated. And this group had, as I recall, 3 trombones, a saxophone and a trumpet, and a rhythm section. And I was hired to be the pianist for that. And everything was written and arranged by Doc. Well, the trombones were rehearsing their parts along with the trumpet, and the rhythm section was off on that. So I was kind of standing off to the side, and Doc was sitting at a table. And he was arranging a song and writing down all the notes for the arrangements for all of the instruments in the Trombones Incorporated, but it was a different song from what the trombones were rehearsing at the time. And I'm like thinking, how could you think of arranging a song in one key different from a song that's being played in the same room, which startled me that this man truly had a mind that was exceptional. And while that was happening, he suddenly said, "Stop." And he looked over at the trombones and he said, "Second trombone, go back to section B, second measure, please change that B to a G to a G sharp." And he did that while he was still involved with arranging another song. It was when I really first learned of the true genius of this man, what he could do. So I was privileged to play many of his arrangements through the big bands that I played with in those early years. Because he was a very humble guy. He never really wanted to be in the limelight. That's not the way I saw him. He would come to hear me play at Galen Hall Restaurant, where I played for 40 years. And every time he came, he would come up and say how much he enjoyed it. And I don't want to toot a horn. What I want to do is spread a light on the Doc. That's the kind of guy he was. You probably could have made mistakes and he'd still come up and he would compliment you. But he always seemed to appreciate my style and the complicated chords that I enjoyed playing as I improvised. And I saw a commonness between us. So he was not the kind of guy that jumped out in front and would be the soloist. But he was a smooth player. Some guys blare a horn. I recall Doc as being much more smooth than that. but he had the skill and the talent to play in any way that was required. The Trombones Incorporated was a unique idea that he had. How many bands could anybody ever say they heard that had 8 pieces in it and 3 of them were trombones, along with a saxophone and a trumpet?
Mike Eben has devoted much of his career to teaching students of all ages about jazz. He taught instrumental music and led jazz bands in the Muhlenberg School District until his retirement. And he taught a class on the history of jazz at Albright College, where he directed the Big Cat Jazz Ensemble. He now chairs the Get Jazz program for Berks Jazz Fest and hosts 2 jazz camps each summer. Mike is an in-demand saxophonist who performs and records with his band From the Hip, and with his jazz sextet he performs throughout the region. He was inspired by Doc Mulligan ever since he was in college. Mike was the winner of the 2008 Frank Scott Award.
I'm a saxophonist. Love jazz. I've loved it all my life since I played in high school with Muhlenberg Spoilers back in the day with Hank Hoffman in the band. Started with Count Basie, went to Lebanon Valley College. We had a student-run jazz band there. And in 1975-76, I was the director of that band, so that was a lot of fun. We asked Doc to do an arrangement for us. He did Stevie Wonder's Livin' for the City, I remember that. So that was a lot of fun, and that's really the first thing I remember as far as my interactions with Doc. I couldn't tell you exactly when I met him. If I was playing somewhere, and I think this is true of a lot of musicians in the area, if Doc was at your show, he was probably the first person you went to during the break to find out how it was going. Because Doc didn't pull punches. If he thought something wasn't working right, he'd tell you. But if he thought it was great, he'd go, "Sounds great, babe." And then you'd get a smile on your face and go, "Okay, I got Doc's approval, so we're good to go." Doc Mulligan is really the impetus for all of our education that we do during the Berks Jazz Fest. Our Get Jazz program is inspired by him. And again, we don't know exactly what year Doc started doing these things, but Doc was always interested in working with kids. If we had a clinic or something like that, Doc would generally be at those clinics, just to listen in and see what was going on. If you asked his advice, he was happy to sit down and talk to you about music. I always remember him saying that students need to learn how to play a ballad. He said, if you could play a ballad, then you were really starting to say something on your instrument. And he always wanted to do something with that, I remember. And he and Al Seifarth were always looking for new ways to get the kids involved, and they were big proponents of education. And that's really the impetus for the whole thing. That's where Get Jazz evolved from. Anything we do for our Berks County students is a Doc Mulligan Day. So we have our Jazz Jam. That's usually the first Monday of Jazz Fest, and that's a lot of fun. We're on stage with anywhere from 6 to 8 fantastic musicians from Jazz Fest. We usually have about 20 to 30 students come in and perform. They get up on stage in various configurations, so that's a blast. We've done all kinds of things. We had an adjudication day where we had jazz bands come in and do a traditional jazz festival. That has morphed into scholastic days now, where we've gone beyond that. And we have a 2-day program now where schools from all over southeastern Pennsylvania and beyond into neighboring states are coming. I think we have 30 schools coming this year over 2 days to do clinics and educational events. We'll have jam sessions, we'll have master classes. It's going to be with local musicians and with Jazz Fest musicians as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's all due to Doc Mulligan. So last year during Jazz Fest, we had some master classes and some jazz jams during our 2-day scholastic event. And we had it in the amphitheater of the Doubletree Hotel. And we called it Doc's Place. We put a nice little sign up there. And we just wanted to be something special. So this year we'd like to up the ante a little bit. We want to make it look like maybe a club of some kind, give it a little bit more pizzazz this year. We're doing this series of interviews and things so that we can learn a little bit more about Doc and his legacy. Because, you know, I'm getting older.
Eric Koala, a saxophonist, vocalist, recording and performing artist, and band leader, recalls how he connected with Doc Mulligan early in his life and how this impacted his career as a musician.
I am a Governor Mifflin graduate. I graduated in 1997. I always sang when I was younger because my mom sang around the house, and then between 8th and 9th grade I decided to pick up the saxophone because my sister was in the marching band over there twirling flags, and all my friends were in there. So I thought, what instrument should I pick up? And of course, saxophone is the greatest instrument in my mind ever invented. So, so I played all throughout high school, auditioned for county band, county chorus, district chorus, regional, all that stuff, district band. And then I went to the, one year, it was 1996, and it was the first year of the Berks County High School All-Star Jazz Band. And that was a really cool experience, even though I didn't know what I was doing, but that's how you learn. And then decided that, well, maybe music isn't the best thing to go into, so I got my accounting degree from Shippensburg, but then I was asked by Bobby Mercer, who actually saw me in the Berks County All-Star Jazz Band in 1997, to join his band. And I turned him down about 3 or 4 times because I hadn't picked my saxophone up in about 3 or 4 months. So I really didn't think I was going to know what I was doing, but he talked me into it. I went to Harrisburg to play with him from Shippensburg, and this monster was born. This creature was born, and the music got into me, and since then I started a group called the Uptown Band, which this is our 18th year. We perform all over the Northeast, sometimes nationally, and I just love what I'm doing, and so much of it I attribute back to the Berks County High School All-Star Jazz Band, which sort of started it all for me. Robert Doc Mulligan I grew up about 5 minutes from his house. And when Bobby Mercer hired me, I was 19 years old, and he would go over to Doc's. We would just hang out with him and stuff, and he had that beautiful house there in Wyomissing. And we would go in, and his piano would be there in the big room off to the right. And I'd just go in, and he would be showing me chords. And I knew nothing of what he was showing me. Let me tell you, when I tell you, I knew nothing. But he was the first guy that gave me a fake book, and he said, here, go make copies of this fake book. And, you know, a fake book in jazz has so many of the jazz standards. So what I did was I made copies of that. I still have those copies today in a red binder, the original red binder that's all beat up that I put him in after that. And he would just sit there and show me chords, and we became really good friends just through that. And it was through Bobby Mercer that introduced me to Doc. And then Doc also would perform with Bobby because he would, his core band was a 7-piece band, but then he would sometimes have a big band for his 100 Years of American Music. And Doc Mulligan would perform with it, and that's how I got to meet Doc, and that's how we became really good friends. You know, he loved to come out and hear music, and when Doc was in the crowd, it didn't matter if he was coming to see us with the Uptown Band, the last big band, wherever he would come to see you, you wanted to be better. You wanted to see, you know, oh, that's Doc Mulligan in the crowd. And he didn't think anything of it. You know, he just thought, you know, that it's just me, you know, he's just me. But he really gives me almost chills to think about him because he was the sweetest man ever, the sweetest man that this county has ever known. And just to know him, my flute clarinet teacher was Tony Cardilla up in Frackville, Pennsylvania. And I would, when I had my job in King of Prussia, I would go up there every 2 weeks to learn how to play flute and saxophone and clarinet. And Tony passed away about 3 or 4 years ago, and so Doc knew him very well from performing with him. So I picked Doc up, and we went up to, with my ex-girlfriend, we went up to the funeral, and I never had so much, and I don't want to say it was enjoyment, but just being able to talk to him for an hour about different things, because this was right when I was about to release, in the year of my Great American Songbook CD, which had a lot of big band arrangements, and Doc was a master of big band arrangements, 5 saxes, 4 trumpets, 4 trombones, and the full 4-piece rhythm section. And it was just really cool just letting him hear what we had on the CD and just talking to him about all his stories throughout the years. And you're not supposed to have a good time going to a funeral, and it actually was the most fun I ever had going to a funeral. I hate to say that, but because it was Doc, because I got to just sit down with him and talk to him in a different way, and that's one memory that stands out. In this area, Doc Mulligan has impacted every part of this jazz community, whether it was writing charts for the old Reading Big Band, whether it was writing charts for Dave Stahl arrangements, whether it was writing for Bobby Mercer, whoever he wrote for over the years. You know, these things, that's the wonderful thing about these arrangements in music is they live on. Doc lives on, not only through his personality, all of us that know him, but through these musical arrangements that we perform often. For example, in the last big band library, we have at least 5 or 6 Doc Mulligan charts in there, and I have some from Doc as well, and it feels good when you play those arrangements and you're like, man, he was such a great arranger. And he never thought he was good at all. He never thought he was a good arranger. And what we do though, you play these songs and it just makes you think, wow, that's a legacy right there. And he could have written, I know he did a chart for Ronnie Millsap that was on one of his albums, who actually is just retiring from touring. But he never thought his arranging was great, and that's what makes it so beautiful too. Is that he had no ego on it, and what he thought at the time at home was just his representation of his idea or his chord structure or what he thought that song would be, and just beautiful.